My family trusted my sister's false accusation, cut me off completely, and left me to suffer. Now they expect me to rescue them from losing their home, so I let them lose it all. Before I dive into the heart of this story, you need to know my starting point. I'm a 28-year-old guy who grew up believing we had a solid family in an upper-middle-class neighborhood in the suburbs outside Chicago. On the outside, my parents seemed completely put together. Dad held a job as a financial consultant at a well-known company in the city, bringing in enough money to support us all comfortably. Mom handled part-time work selling houses, but her real focus was protecting the family's perfect image. That meant joining every local organization and making sure our holiday photos looked flawless. I was their real son, the standout kid who always got things right. I earned top grades with almost no effort, stayed naturally fit, and showed respect to grown-ups. I wasn't perfect, of course. During my teen years, I made some typical mistakes, like sneaking drinks with buddies or hosting a noisy gathering now and then, but those incidents stayed minor. Nothing serious enough to damage the spotless reputation Mom worked so hard to maintain. When I turned 10, they brought home Lily, who was 3 years old at the time, because Mom had always dreamed of having a girl. I still remember the afternoon they arrived with her, this small child with big brown eyes who instantly charmed every person in the room. I'll be honest, I acted a little mean toward her in the beginning. All of a sudden, I wasn't the main focus anymore. Every moment centered on Lily's first preschool experience, her dance performances, and her cute new outfits. In hindsight, it was normal brotherly jealousy, but back then it felt like I had been replaced. As the years passed, I believed we shared a normal brother-sister bond, nothing special, just ordinary. We argued from time to time, yet I always protected her. When she was in 2nd grade, another kid started pulling her hair and shoving her on the playground. I was in 9th grade then, and I clearly recall walking her to school one morning and having a firm talk with that bully. After that, no one bothered her again. I even showed her simple self-defense moves, like how to throw a real punch if she ever needed to. That's what an older brother does, right? By my final year of college, I was doing great. I served as captain of our Division II baseball team, with real chances to play in the minor leagues. I maintained a 3.85 grade point average in business administration with a minor in finance. I had a tight group of friends, the kind who would help you move furniture or come get you at 3 in the morning if your car broke down. I trained hard in the gym and had lifted weights seriously since high school. By college, I had reached peak condition, bench pressing 315 pounds for multiple reps, squatting 405, and deadlifting 495. Everyone aims for that classic V-shaped build with wide shoulders, a narrow waist, and visible abs year-round. I'm not bragging here, just describing exactly where I stood in life. I had a few serious relationships over the years, but none of them lasted. Honestly, my mind stayed focused on what lay ahead. Dad knew people at several major investment firms around Chicago, and right after graduation, I was set to join a management training program at one of the biggest ones. My future looked straightforward. Finish college, possibly continue baseball for a couple more seasons if the chance came, then build a career in finance. Eventually find the right woman, get married, raise kids, and enjoy the American dream. That was the vision anyway. By that time, Lily had turned 15 and reached her sophomore year in high school. She had become this creative theater student who landed roles in nearly every school production and tended to overreact to the smallest things. But that's normal for teenagers. She had her own circle of friends and her own world. When I returned home during college breaks, we would share meals and talk about everyday sister-brother topics, or at least that's what I thought. Looking back now, I miss some warning signs, like the envy in her eyes when Mom and Dad praised my baseball achievements, her little comments about how everything came easy for me, and her habit of inventing detailed tales about school events that clearly never happened. But hindsight is always perfect, isn't it? It happened on a Tuesday in October of my senior year. I had just finished an exhausting practice where the coach pushed us to the limit after we lost a weekend series to our biggest rivals. My legs felt weak and shaky, and my shoulder ached from all the extra throwing sessions, but it was a good kind of sore. The kind that comes from testing your body's limits and getting a strong response. I showered, pulled on jeans and a hoodie, and glanced at my phone while heading to my truck, the F-150 my parents had helped buy for my 20th birthday. Wow, 37 missed calls and 54 text messages. Notes from relatives and friends used words like "you monster," "how could you," and "you're finished." My heart started racing. My immediate thought was that someone had passed away, maybe grandma or grandpa. I called Dad right away. "What on earth is happening?" I asked. When he answered, his tone sounded freezing cold, something I had never experienced from him before. "Get home immediately, don't stop anywhere else." Then he ended the call. I stood frozen in the parking lot, staring at my screen, trying to make sense of it. I tried Mom next, but she didn't pick up. I reached out to my closest friend from high school who still lived close to my parents, but he ignored the call too. It felt as if the whole world had suddenly labeled me toxic. I drove the 20-minute trip home in a daze, my stomach twisting the entire way. The radio played NPR, yet I couldn't catch a single word. When I turned into the driveway, I noticed Uncle Mike's car along with several others parked there. Uncle Mike, my father's younger brother and a construction worker known for his short temper, had never really liked me much. Before I could even step out, he charged down from the porch, yanked open my truck door, seized my shirt, and slammed me against the vehicle. "I'm going to end you," he shouted, his face inches from mine. His spit hit my cheek and I caught the smell of liquor on his breath. His eyes looked completely wild, nothing like I had seen before. I could have easily pushed him off. Mike was 50 years old and out of shape, while I was a 22-year-old athlete at my physical peak, but shock kept me motionless. Dad and my other uncle Steve pulled him back. "Inside right now," Dad ordered, refusing to meet my eyes. I walked up the front steps and entered the living room. The place was crowded. Mom sat on the sofa, her eyes puffy and red from crying. Both pairs of grandparents were there, looking devastated. Aunts, uncles, and even some close family friends filled the room. And Lily, my sister, huddled against Grandma, crying into her shoulder. The instant I stepped inside, total silence fell. Every person stared at me with a mix of horror and disgust that sent a chill through my veins. "What in the world is going on?" I yelled, searching their faces for any hint of explanation. Mom lifted her head, her expression twisted with anger and hatred I had never witnessed from her. "How could you do this to your own sister? What are you talking about?" I asked, glancing around desperately for answers. Dad stepped closer, his usual calm professional manner completely gone. He looked ready to attack me with his bare hands. "Lily told us everything about how you've been sneaking into her room at night for years." The words hit me like a speeding train. I couldn't catch my breath, the room started to spin. "What? That's completely crazy, I never laid a hand on her." Lily cried even harder now. "You told me no one would believe me. You said you'd harm me if I spoke up. You said it was our little secret." "That's," I shouted, shock turning into fury. "I never said any of that, I've never done anything to her." "What is happening here?" Uncle Mike lunged toward me again, but Dad and Uncle Steve held him back. "My friend is a police officer. You're headed to prison, you worthless creep. They'll have a field day with you there." I tried to defend myself and point out how ridiculous the claims were, but it was pointless, like arguing with a brick wall. No one listened to a word. Lily kept adding more details and inventing events that had never occurred. She claimed the first time happened when she was 10, and I was home from high school during Christmas break. They said it had gone on many times after that. I supposedly threatened to hurt her mom and dad if she ever told. She fabricated the whole thing, yet everyone nodded, comforted her, and shot deadly glares at me. The situation felt surreal, as if I had entered some parallel universe where everything was flipped upside down. Then Dad lost control. He had always stayed composed and never used violence. But something inside him shattered. He walked straight up to me and threw a powerful right hook worthy of a professional boxer. It connected perfectly with my jaw, knocking me down. I tasted blood from where my teeth cut into my cheek. "Pack your stuff and get out. You're no longer my son," he roared, standing over me and clenching his fist. Mom had already stuffed some of my clothes into garbage bags. They waited by the door. Dad snatched my wallet and removed every card that carried his name, including credit cards and my health insurance. "Dad, please, this isn't true," I pleaded while blood dripped from my split lip. "You've known me my entire life. You know I could never do something like this." He grabbed my shirt, dragged me to the entrance, and shoved me down the front stairs. I hit the ground hard on my shoulder and felt a sharp crack, which later turned out to be a minor separation. The bags of clothing came flying after me, then my baseball equipment followed. "If you ever approach this family again, I'll kill you myself," he said, slamming the door shut. I sat there on the grass, blood covering my face, shoulder throbbing, while neighbors watched the chaos through their windows. My whole world had crumbled in under an hour. That night I stayed in my truck at the baseball field parking lot, replaying everything in my mind. Sleep was impossible. I kept going over the scene, wondering how Lily could invent this and how my parents could accept it without any doubt. By morning, my jaw had swollen and turned purple, and my shoulder hurt so badly I could barely lift my arm. I phoned a teammate named Ryan, and he let me sleep on his couch for a week. His roommates weren't thrilled, but they put up with it. I tried calling, texting, and emailing every family member, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and people I had known forever. No replies came, except for one short message from Dad. "Contact us again and I'll get a restraining order. You no longer exist to us." Ryan tried to offer advice. "Man, you should go to the police. Report that your dad assaulted you, get in front of this situation." But I couldn't bring myself to do it. Something inside refused to accept that this nightmare was real. I kept hoping my parents would wake up and realize how insane the accusation was. And truthfully, fear held me back. What if Lily stuck to her story? What if they kept believing her over me? How could I ever prove I didn't do something that never happened? 2 weeks later, an email arrived from the university. My tuition for the semester hadn't been paid. My parents had stopped the payment. I visited the financial aid office and tried for an emergency loan. Without a cosigner and almost no credit record, I had no chance. I had to drop most of my classes to part-time so I could work full-time just to cover the reduced load. Coach showed understanding at first and kept me on the roster. But I missed too many practices because of my new night job providing security at a bar, so I barely got any playing time. My grades dropped sharply. I went from Dean's List to barely scraping by. Friends started distancing themselves as rumors spread. Someone in the family shared the story and it traveled from person to person. You know how quickly that happens. No one called me a predator to my face, but I saw the changed looks. Conversations stopped when I entered a room, and female classmates would shift away if I sat near them in lecture halls. 4 months after that, my truck failed. The engine block cracked. Repairs would cost thousands. I couldn't pay. I lost my side delivery job that I had added to the bar security work. I got evicted from the cheap apartment I shared with 2 other guys because the rent went unpaid. I began sleeping in the baseball team's equipment shed after Coach gave me the access code. I showered in the locker room. I ate just 1 meal a day in the cafeteria using the last of my meal plan. Coach found me there one freezing February night. The temperature had dropped below 0, and I was layered in 3 hoodies inside a sleeping bag, using my duffel as a pillow. Instead of yelling, he sat beside me on the concrete floor. "Son, what the hell happened to you?" he asked, his voice full of real concern. I told him the complete story, the false accusation, my parents' reaction, being cut off, losing the truck and the apartment. He was the first person who actually listened to the whole thing. When I finished, he didn't accuse me of lying. He didn't say he believed me either. He simply nodded and stayed quiet for a moment. "You can stay here until the semester ends. After that, we'll figure something out." The next day, he brought a space heater and a decent air mattress. He started inviting me to dinner at his house once a week. His wife would send me home with leftovers. It wasn't much, but it meant everything. Someone actually cared. I ended the year with a 2.1 GPA and just avoided getting kicked out academically. But baseball was over for me. The passion had died. Coach arranged a summer job for me at a wilderness camp for at-risk kids in Colorado. Ironic, isn't it? Still, it paid in cash, provided a staff cabin for housing, and kept me fed. That fall, I didn't go back to classes. I stayed on with the program and took a full-time role as a guide. My days involved hiking through mountains and teaching survival techniques to privileged children whose parents didn't know what else to do with them. I rebuilt my body through hard work. Hauling 50-pound packs up steep trails, chopping firewood, and building shelters all demanded serious effort. I added 15 pounds of solid muscle in 6 months. At night, I drank heavily until I blacked out with the other guides. On days off, I tried whatever substances I could find, including marijuana, LSD, mushrooms, and cocaine. I took no precautions. I didn't care anymore. I just wanted to escape the reality that my old life had disappeared forever. After one guide died in a climbing accident that I might have prevented if I hadn't been recovering from a hangover, the program director pulled me aside. "Jake, you're one of our top guides. When you're focused, the kids look up to you. You handle the outdoors like a pro, but right now you're a danger. I can't risk kids' lives while you're falling apart." I was let go the following day. The next year, I lived out of my old junker car, a 1998 Honda Civic I bought for $1,200 cash. I took any work I could get, from bar bouncer to event security, manual labor, and construction sites. Any role that used my size and didn't dig too deeply into my background. I stayed completely away from women. I avoided any place with families. I would actually leave a restaurant if a child sat near my table. The fear of another false accusation paralyzed me. I had recurring nightmares about landing in prison and inmates learning why I was there. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding so violently I thought I might be having a heart attack. One night, I handled security at a college bar in Fort Collins. I spotted a guy from my old university who had played football during my time there. He recognized me too. He started telling his friends who I was and what I had supposedly done. Soon they were all staring and making loud remarks I could clearly hear. Predator, disgusting. Someone needs to make sure he never hurts anyone again. I tried to ignore them and focus on my duties. At 2 in the morning, I cleared out the last customers and headed toward my car when 3 of them jumped me in the parking lot. They had been waiting. They called me a pedophile and a monster. They claimed they would make certain I could never harm another person. I fought hard. I landed some strong hits. I definitely broke one guy's nose. But 3 against 1 plus the surprise attack worked against me. I ended up with 3 broken ribs, a fractured eye socket, a dislocated shoulder, and a concussion. The one with the broken nose must have panicked because they ran when another car entered the lot. The driver called for an ambulance. I spent 2 nights in the hospital and left with no place to stay, no insurance, and a $17,000 medical bill I couldn't afford. The painkillers barely helped. My injuries kept me from working. I slept in my car at Walmart lots and washed up in gas station restrooms whenever I could raise my arms. I reached the point where I was done, completely finished. It was raining hard in the middle of the night. I drove to an old bridge outside town, high enough to end it all. I parked the Civic, walked to the middle, and climbed over the railing. Every movement made my ribs scream in pain. I don't know how long I stood there. Rain poured over me as I looked down at the dark water below. My phone stayed in my hand. No messages or calls in 3 years. My family had stayed completely silent. No one was coming to rescue me. No one cared whether I lived or died. A little cold for a swim, isn't it? The voice startled me so much I almost lost my grip. I held the railing tight with my good arm, pain shooting through my cracked ribs. I turned and saw an older man in his 70s wearing a raincoat, holding a fishing pole. "Leave me alone," I said, my voice shaking. "Can't do that, son," he replied calmly, as if we were chatting on a sunny afternoon. "See, if I walk away and you jump, that becomes my responsibility. It wasn't my problem until I saw you, but that's how life works." He stepped closer, not threatening, just steady. "My name's Frank, retired from the Marine Corps. I've seen plenty of men reach their lowest point. You want to tell me what brought you to the wrong side of that railing? You wouldn't get it? Try me." For some reason, I told him the entire story. The accusation being thrown out and the last 3 years of hell. Maybe because I figured I would jump soon anyway. Maybe because he was a stranger who didn't instantly judge me as evil. Maybe because his eyes reminded me of my grandfather, the only family member who might have believed me before dementia took over. When I finished, he just nodded, the same way my old coach had. Then he said words I will never forget. "Son, you've carried this burden alone long enough. Set it down for one night. Come get a hot meal and dry clothes, and we'll talk with clear minds tomorrow. Why would you help someone like me? You don't even know if I'm telling the truth." Frank's eyes stayed sharp even in the dim light. "I've been reading people's faces for 50 years, both in war and peacetime. You're either being honest or you're the greatest liar I've ever encountered. Either way, death lasts forever, a meal doesn't." I could have ignored him, I could have jumped anyway. Sometimes I still wonder why I didn't, but something in his steady belief and calm presence during my chaos made me climb back over the railing. Frank's house was modest but spotless. Everything followed military order, books lined up neatly on shelves and shoes aligned perfectly by the door. He gave me dry clothes that belonged to his son, who had been killed in Afghanistan 10 years earlier. He made me shower while he prepared food. That night I slept on Frank's couch. For the first time in what felt like forever, I actually rested. The next morning he cooked breakfast, eggs, bacon, and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Then he offered me a job. He said he ran a small security company that handled executive protection, event security, and other special services for wealthy clients. "We need a young, strong guy who can take direction and stay quiet. Why would you trust me with that?" I asked. "You just met me and I was about to end my life." Frank looked straight into my eyes. "Because a man who's been pushed to the brink and still chooses to step back has something worth living for, even if he doesn't see it yet. And because if you ever betray me, I know exactly how to track you down." For the next 6 months, I lived in Frank's spare room while working for his company. He ran a strict schedule, 5 a.m. workouts, clear rules, and no drinking on work nights. He made me see a doctor for my injuries. He covered the bills himself and said I could repay him once I got stable, but he treated me fairly. The pay was good. They taught me about money management, investing, proper business dress, client interaction, and how to act professional again. He also required me to see a therapist, an old friend from Vietnam who specialized in trauma recovery. I resisted at first, but Frank wouldn't accept no. You've taken some hard hits, son, and not just physical ones. You need to straighten out your mind if you're going to work for me. The counseling helped gradually. It showed me the events weren't my fault, I didn't deserve them, and I wasn't permanently broken. After 6 months, I had saved enough to rent my own place, a small apartment. Nothing luxurious, but it was mine, clean and secure. I started business management classes at the local community college along with specialized security training. Frank started feeling like the father I had lost. He never pushed me to reach out to my family. He never suggested I try to prove my innocence. He simply said, some fights aren't worth the effort. Focus on winning the bigger battle by building a life no one can steal. After a year with Frank, he put me in charge of security for his niece's art gallery opening. He called it a favor for his sister, but I later realized he was setting us up. Sophie wasn't what I had pictured. Frank had called her extremely sharp and someone who doesn't tolerate nonsense, which was true but didn't cover everything. She had a unique kind of beauty, tall and fit with striking green eyes that seemed to read straight through people. Her dark hair was styled in an asymmetrical cut that perfectly framed her face. She wasn't the typical magazine model pretty, but she had a powerful presence that drew every eye in the room. We didn't connect immediately. She figured I was just another big security guy without much brain. I thought she was a snobby art type. During the event, I overheard her describing an abstract painting to a potential buyer, then rolling her eyes when the person left without purchasing. Not everyone understands it, I said, not meaning to start a conversation. She gave me a slow look up and down, noting my security suit. And you do? Not really. But I'm not faking it either. She almost smiled, almost. Honesty, that's refreshing. All evening I caught her watching me. Not in a watch the guard so he doesn't steal way, but with genuine interest. I stayed focused on my duties, scanning the space, checking entrances, and monitoring the valuable pieces. Professional, attentive, yet low-key. She came up to me at the end of the night as I wrapped up and the final guests left. So Uncle Frank says you're more than just muscle. Your uncle talks too much, I replied. She laughed. It was a real warm laugh, not the fake polite one I'd heard all night. Actually, he hardly speaks at all, which is why people pay attention when he does. He mentioned you're taking classes. Business management, yeah. Plus some advanced security certifications. Interesting mix, tell me more. We talked until 2 in the morning about almost everything except my past. She was smart, funny, and challenging in the best ways. She had traveled widely. She held strong opinions on art, politics, and music, yet she truly listened to my thoughts. When I finally said I had to go because of an early training session with a new client, she handed me her card. I have a security concern at my condo. The locks need updating. Maybe you could check it out. It was an obvious excuse, but I agreed. That consultation turned into dinner, then movie evenings, then full weekends together. Sophie was different from anyone I had dated before. Strongly independent, passionate about her work, yet open and vulnerable in quiet times. She had been hurt too, though not exactly the same way I had, because shared pain recognizes itself. For months I avoided talking about my family. When she asked, I gave vague answers. I claimed my parents had died in a car crash, that I was an only child. Sophie could tell I was holding back, but she didn't push. Frank, however, insisted I tell her the truth. That girl is falling for you, he said one day at work while we prepared for another event. And you're falling for her, she deserves the full story before things go further. He was right. So one evening over dinner at my apartment, I shared everything. The whole painful tale. I expected her to walk away, to look at me with suspicion and wonder if Lily had been telling the truth. Instead, she reached across the table, took my hand and said, "Thank you for trusting me, I believe you." No one except Frank had ever spoken those 3 words to me. I broke down right there at the table, crying like a little kid. She just held me and let me release it all. 2 years after we met, I proposed. I did it properly, down on one knee in the exact spot of our first real date, ring ready, heart pounding. Frank walked her down the aisle since her own father had passed away years earlier. We bought a modest house in a peaceful neighborhood. We started building a genuine life together. I completed my degree and became a full partner in Frank's company. We expanded from local work to regional and then national contracts, earning a name for reliability and discretion. Sophie's art career soared. Her pieces began showing in major galleries and sold for good money. We started talking about having children. I was finally content, finally at peace. The nightmares came less often. I could be around kids without freezing up. I even reconnected with a couple of old college friends who reached out after learning parts of the real story through mutual contacts. My old life felt far away, like it had happened to another person. I still thought about my family sometimes. I wondered if they had ever questioned Lily's story. if they ever felt sorry for what they did, but I had come to terms with that chapter being finished. I had a new family now, people who chose me and stood by me. That was enough. Or at least I believed it was. It was an ordinary Tuesday in March. I sat in my office reviewing security plans for an upcoming event with a billionaire tech executive who needed low-profile protection during a conference. My assistant called over the intercom. "Sir, line 1 for you. A woman wouldn't give her name but says it's a family emergency." My first thought went to Sophie or Frank. Put her through. I picked up the phone. "Hello, this is Jake." That wasn't my real name, of course. Silence, then a sob. "Jake, it's Mom." My body went cold. I hadn't heard her voice in 7 years. I wanted to hang up. I wanted to yell. Instead, I simply said, "What do you want?" "Please don't hang up," she pleaded. "We need to talk. It's important. We haven't spoken in 7 years." Nothing could be that important. My voice stayed ice cold. Lily confessed she lied about everything. She made the whole thing up. The world stopped turning. 7 years of pain. 7 years of rebuilding my life from nothing. 7 years of panic attacks and therapy, all because of one lie. I had known it was false, but hearing her admit it. "Jake, are you still there?" I hung up. I left the office, told my assistant to cancel everything, and drove straight to Frank's house. After I told him, he simply nodded and asked, "What do you want to do?" "I don't know." "Yes, you do. You just aren't sure if it's the right choice." He was correct. One part of me wanted to ignore them forever, keep them out of my life for good. Another part needed answers. I needed to hear the truth face to face. Sophie felt the same when I told her that night. "You need closure," she said, "but whatever you choose, I'm right here with you, and Jake, this changes nothing between us. I'm still here no matter what." For 2 weeks, I ignored the growing calls and messages from Mom, Dad, and even the relatives who had abandoned me years earlier. I discussed it with my therapist. Yes, I still see one. I'm not ashamed to admit it. Finally, I realized I had to face them, but only on my conditions. I texted my mother, "Public place, coffee shop on Main Street, Sunday at 2 p.m. Just you, Dad, and Lily. I'll bring people with me, one chance only." Sunday arrived. Frank insisted on coming as support. Sophie stayed right beside me, holding my hand so tightly it almost hurt. We got there early. I chose a corner table so I could watch every entrance and exit, an old security habit I could never shake. My stomach stayed in knots. Part of me still thought they might not show up or that this was some elaborate trick. Sophie kept checking on me, her eyes full of worry. "We can leave anytime, okay? Just say the word." They arrived exactly at 2 o'clock. Mom looked older than I remembered. Her hair had gone mostly gray and her face showed deep lines of stress. Dad had lost so much weight he appeared gaunt. His expensive clothes were gone, replaced by plain khakis and a faded button-down shirt. Lily, now 22, looked very different from the teenager I remembered. Her face seemed thinner, her eyes stayed lowered. She had lost that dramatic energy. When Mom saw me, tears filled her eyes and she rushed forward with open arms for a hug. I stepped back, keeping Sophie slightly in front of me. "Sit down." No one spoke for what felt like several long minutes. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. "Son, I'm not your son." I cut him off. "You made that perfectly clear 7 years ago. Now talk. Why am I here?" Mom started crying. Dad looked completely shattered.